players all over the world have struggled to earn the Grandmaster title. Which players will earn a norm? Which players will go home with the prize? Welcome to the 2018 St. Louis Norm Congress. Hello, chess fans, and welcome back to St. Louis for the 2018 St. Louis Norm Congress, the Grandmaster and International Master Norm Tournaments. I'm Ben Simon, along with Grandmaster Josh Friedel. We're here for round number 2 and round number 1. Last night, man, blood on the board all over the place. 9 out of 10 distinct, decisive results.
It was quite something to watch. It really was.
And we have, we're going to have the recap of round 1. We're going to look at the live games being played right now in round 2. But about norms, if you're hearing about this for the very first time, it can be kind of confusing. The gist of it is, a norm is a performance that you have in a tournament, a very strong performance above a certain rating. And it's all decided by mathematics. Of course, we'll get to it later on. But if you have 3 Grandmaster norms, that is 3 superior tournament performances with other Grandmasters, then you get another notch in your belt, a norm toward becoming a Grandmaster. And the same goes with the International Master title, which is one step below. So we'll see who gets those doctorates, or the steps toward the doctorates of chess. But we have already seen some games being played last night. Let's take a look at who's playing in this tournament, first in the Grandmaster norm section itself. Now, this is the top section. We have international players all over the place. That is certainly required in a norm tournament to guarantee every player who is not a Grandmaster the chance to get a norm. Josh, it's a strong field.
It certainly is. It's not only strong, it's really diverse. You notice how there's a lot of U.S. players, most of whom we're familiar with, but then there's Boros from Hungary actually lives in St. Louis. However, you have Vorontsov, you have Hamrakulov, you have Solokidu, who are from Ukraine, Uzbekistan, and Greece, and completely unknown players to most of us, and look forward to seeing how they do and how they compete against America's best.
Like we said yesterday, this tournament is a big chance for us to meet some of those new players. These events are the first time we hear these up-and-comer names, and we look forward to seeing more of them. Now, there's also an International Master Norm section. Let's take a look at the roster in that. Now, 10 players. We have 3 International Masters in this section, 3 of the 4 top places. Now, this screen is organized by rating. We haven't gotten to the standings yet, so this is simply by rating going into it. Sergei Matsenko, the top player, if you combine both of the fields, the strongest player.
Yes, he's the highest rated player in both fields, and in this field, the highest rated by quite a bit. So I'll be interested to see whether he dominates the field or whether he's tripped up by some of these young players.
Josh, how does that happen? How is he just an international master and he has that really high rating?
I've seen this happen with Russian players in particular and with certain federations, because you have to actually apply for your title. They don't just give it automatically, put a wand, knight you or whatever. You have to actually apply for it, send it in, and I think some federations don't do that as much. I remember the player Vityugov, who's now a 2,700 plus GM. I saw him, I think he was an FM in the high 2,600s.
Oh my goodness.
And it's like, come on guys, just give him his title, please.
That's an extreme example.
It's a very extreme example, but it does happen, and I'm sure he's met the requirements and he'll probably get awarded it pretty soon. They'll probably just hand it to him.
I'm going to have to check on this. I was told in passing by an arbiter that there is a GM-elect in one of the fields, and I'm going to have to double-check who that is. I do not have that on my information sheet right here. It might be him. I don't know.
It's very likely.
Hopefully, right? Hopefully. So our tournament format consists of 2 10-player round robins with the players we just saw. The time control is game in 90 minutes for each player base time, with a 30-second increment from move number 1. So the 30 seconds will add up. Because of that, the players are required to take notation the entire length of the game. Sometimes you see in time controls where you have less than 5 minutes left, You don't have to take notation anymore. That's not the case in this event.
It's not the case whenever there's increment. That's not the case. It's only the case when it's a 5-second delay. Increment can lull you to sleep, though, because you think 30 seconds, I can get low on time. A lot of people are habitual time troublers. I'll try not to mention too many names. But they get really low and they think, the increment, I'm fine because I can build up time. But once you get low in this time control, you don't get a second time control. You don't get an extra 30 minutes. You don't get an extra hour. So you get low, you're going to be playing quick the rest of the game, and not everyone's happy with that situation. And if you're in a complex game, that can be doubly bad.
Well, it happened in the last couple of years. I think there was a game with Magnus Carlsen where he thought there was a second time control, like at move 40, and there wasn't.
Happen. I'd like to say Grandmasters are super professional at knowing the time controls of each event and doing all that, but I would say that if anything, they're more lazy, and at times they don't know the event, so they don't know the time controls, they don't know the round times. It's almost embarrassing. So I would not surprise me.
Let's see if any of these players will have an embarrassing moment. Hopefully not for their sake.
We don't need more excitement. They're already good.
It would be exciting for us, right? Let's take a look at the schedule. This schedule, it's a little odd. We have 2 rounds some of these days. The first round was last night. We're going to have 2 rounds on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the times you need to remember are 11 a.m. Central Time and 5 p.m. Central Time. These players are going to be playing 2 games a day in most cases. On Monday and Tuesday at 11 a.m. both days will have the penultimate and the final rounds, respectively. Those will be important rounds indeed, George.
They certainly will, and these players actually get the opposite of what most working people do. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they're working hard. They kind of get it to take it a little easier on Monday and Tuesday, but I think, as I mentioned in our intro, those can be dangerous rounds because you get 1 round a day, you think it's easier, your brain kind of lays off chess, and it can work against you. So we'll see how they do those 2 rounds, but I'm guessing the players will be happy to have a slight break for after the 8th round.
The 9 to 5 office world is having their Friday, but this is just our Tuesday. The week is just beginning, fans. Okay, let's take a look at the results from last night. Our first round was played. We were not live on the air, but you must have seen the action at uschesschamps.com. The games were in the Chess 24 module, a great way to watch chess.
And a lot of action there was.
There was. Oh, my gosh, blood on the board. Josh, what do you think of this round?
It was a really interesting round. I thought that all the games could have been decisive, or many games could have been drawn. For example, the chain with the 2 GMs, Akshat Chandra and Mark Paragua, could have easily been a win for Akshat, but he blundered a pawn at the last minute and enabled Paragua to snag the draw. Whereas Khamrakulov against Bartholomew, I thought was going to be a draw for most of the game. But at the very end, Khamrakulov really played some very accurate chess, put pressure on John, and John was not able to hold the position. So that could have gone either way. A lot of the other games were fairly insane. So, it was quite something.
Just fairly insane, though.
Fairly insane, yeah. I should point out that Solakito did win her game against Patel.
Right.
In there. So just letting people know that Patel did not win that.
Oh, there was a misprint.
There was
okay. We'll have to look into that.
Yep.
Now, let's take a look at the results for the International Master Norm section in round 1. And just like the red on the screen, Josh, a lot of blood on the boards.
There certainly was, and I think red is going to be the color for this event because I'm guessing there's going to be lots of rounds with lots of blood. And that does not say anything bad about the players. They're fighting. They're trying to they're trying to create nice results, and honestly, it's a treat for us to watch, especially with so many young players in this event. Again, Justin Wang only 12, a couple others who are 14, 15. It's a young event. Apart from also Tansel Turgut, as we mentioned, in his 50s, but still playing good chess and actually got a very nice win against Jacobson.
The cardiologist chess player.
Indeed.
Well, Josh, why is it that when we have like the super strong tournaments, like the Sinkfield Cup and the London Classic and all of the other classical events, whenever those top 10 players play each other, they're a lot more likely to draw than these players?
They certainly are, and there are lots of reasons for that. I think partially they're really well prepared, especially in the opening. So a lot of the times, the position they get out of the opening is just not much, or barely like a teeny advantage to work with, and they're all excellent defenders. So it takes a lot for them to win games, and they're playing at a high level. They're playing at a higher level than these players. Not that these players aren't very strong, but it just makes it very difficult to win games. Whereas these players, the openings tend to be more varied. A lot of them play more aggressively. You see more mistakes, and therefore you see more back-and-forth results. I don't think either is bad. I like to watch both, but honestly, sometimes it's nice to get a break from the elite players and watch these guys really slug it out.
Indeed. And going into today, it's anybody's chess tournament, of course, but let's take a look at the standings coming into today after just one round for the Grandmaster Norm section. All right, Pavel Vorontsov, Kamarkulov, Denis Boros, Solikidu with 1 point, but, everyone's so close. This really can't be taken too seriously at this point.
It's not indicative of how the tournament's going to be necessarily. I mean, again, I mentioned the other day that it's important to get off to a good start, and believe me, winning that first game can definitely propel you to a good tournament, but it doesn't always mean anything. Even in the elite events, I remember one Singfield Cup, I believe it was, where Topalov won the first 2 games and ended up only finishing in the middle of the pack. So in these events, I'd say it's even more likely that could happen. So it's nice to get off to that first win, kind of terrible to lose the first game, but at the same time, they have plenty of room to come back.
And you're just going to see 1s and 0s whenever we take a look at our next standing, the International Master Norm section. Look at that.
Yeah, not a lot of draws in that game.
Not a lot, huh?
Not too many.
0.
Yes, and plenty of interesting games. Matsenko proving his rating so far, but at the same time, again, just one round. You don't really know what's going on. And, yeah, just pretty much all interesting games. Very few of them were one-sided. Almost all of them, the other player could have drawn or maybe even won the game as well. So certainly not, this result did not have to happen this way.
And we're talking about norms a lot. 6 or 6.5 in most cases will get you the norm. It really depends on the player. But if we're a couple rounds from the end of this thing and we know that nobody can norm, there is no problem there because they still can go home with prizes. We have a prize fund here. Let's take a look at the prizes for the Grandmaster Norm section. Ooh, what a lucrative event this is, Josh.
Not bad, and especially norm events tend to have lower prizes than regular events because people are playing for norms. But oftentimes you actually have to pay to play in a norm event. These players actually get to compete for a pretty nice prize fund and at least get their expenses paid for. So it's a pretty good deal.
And also the International Master Norm section has its own prize fund. Not too shabby itself there.
Definitely not.
Up to $1,200. There you see a nice live shot there from one of our cameras in our boardroom at the St. Louis Chess Club, the world-famous St. Louis Chess Club. Both fields are being played there. We see international arbiter Tony Rich, who's actually the deputy arbiter for this event.
He is, but he's clearly, holding his end up there, doing the work, making sure the players are good, or maybe he's just taking a walk. You never know.
Maybe just taking a walk.
Yeah.
So we have the pairings for round number 2, the round that's currently underway, and I know that we have a result or two in, Josh. I haven't been able to glance, but going into the round.
Last I checked, there was one result, which was Mark Paragua defeated Daniel Gurevich, which is, for Paragua, he drew his first game, so now he's off to 1.5 out of 2, whereas Gurevich lost a tough game last night to Khamrakulov. So he's now at 0-2, which means in order to get a Grandmaster Norm, he's got to get 6.5 out of 7. That's a tall order against such a strong field.
It sure is. And these are the games that are happening right now at uschesschamps.com. Board number 5. That will be our game of the day as Khamrakulov takes on Solikidu. And this is just on paper, first of all, the game of the day. Because both players won their games last night, so I mean, if someone wins again, you're suddenly 2-0.
You're 2-0, and they're both playing for Grandmaster Norms. So 2-0 is an awfully good start. It's hard to get 6.5 in a field like this, but if you start out 2-0, needless to say, your chances go up. And last I looked, Solikidu actually had a pretty good position as black. So, but it's an interesting game. It's really double-edged. I look forward to looking at it.
I can't wait to look at that in just a few moments here. But the pairings right now also going on for the International Master Norm section. Here they are, and we don't have any results there, do we, Josh?
Not that I saw last, no.
Okay, and I know that Grabinski had a big edge up on Brandon Jacobson, who seems to be having a tough day, but all the other games, they're still in progress, and the game of the day there definitely has to be Sergei Matsenko and Josh Kolas.
Oh, for sure. And I should correct myself. I noticed that Torres and Chiyu did agree to a draw in their position. So there is one result.
Okay. And there we have the game of the day in this section for sure.
Yeah.
Matsenko and Kolas. I mean, this is Matsenko's tournament to win. If he doesn't win, it's got to be a disappointment, right?
For sure. And honestly, he's probably not only wants to win, he wants to get like 7 out of 9, maybe even better. Because if he wins the tournament with 6.5, he probably still doesn't perform his rating. I don't know if that's quite true, but I mean, I'd say at least 6.5 would be the score he'd be satisfied with. And Colas won a topsy-turvy game last night, which he easily could have lost. So if he can keep his result going and make that result count, it's not always about like how you get the win. If you get the win, you're usually pretty happy, and if you can keep that result going, it's pretty good. So if he can hold the draw in that game, I think he'll be pretty happy with his chances.
Well, chess fans, we are definitely happy to be here with you as a nice friend to walk you through this tournament at uschesschamps.com. So open those games up. Josh, let's go around the horn and take a look at the games.
Well, the first game I'd like to look at is Hamrakulov against Solokidu. Really interesting game. As you can see, black's up in exchange. White's king's a little iffy. I think that Solokidu has an excellent chance to win this game. But let's take a look at how this happened, because this came from quite an interesting opening. Hamrakulov's white, Solokidu's black. Both won their first game. So at first I thought the game was going to be quiet. This is a known quiet line. White can play queen c2, queen b3, g3. Usually it's slow. But White's decided, psych, I'm going to play crazy. Of course, this is a known way to play. It's not like this has never been played before or anything like that. Oftentimes, black usually doesn't want to take this pawn because rook g1, the g7 pawn gets hit. Not exactly a fun time. d5 is kind of the move I like. In general, opponent plays on the side. I like to play in the center. But she chose to castle, which of course is also fine. White plays g5, black plays knight e8. So this knight on e8 is a bit of a sad piece, but it's unclear whether g4, g5 is ever going to be good. It could backfire very easily. Your kid could become weak. And we'll see how opening the board there does backfire on him later. They developed their pieces in a relatively normal manner, I'd say. Bishop g2, queen c2. Both sides are just trying to get out. h4 becomes necessary to make sure this g5 pawn stays guarded. Sometimes he might want to play h5, g6. She plays f5, which is an interesting decision, trying to block off the queen. A typical defensive type move. White doesn't really want to take because that would bring the knight into the game and fix her main problem with the position. So he instead castles. She plays e5, very aggressive, trying to maybe push these pawns, give herself a little extra room. e3 he plays, d6, d3, bishop e6. So both sides are developing relatively normally. But I would say that honestly, with these pawns here, White's the one with something to prove. And if White doesn't prove anything, this could become problematic. Bishop d2, queen d7, king h2. This move is a little funny, but I think the idea is he was worried about f4 and the bishop coming to h3, so he wanted to stop it. This move looks a little suspicious to me, but we'll see how it happens. She plays rook b8. I'm guessing just a slight improvement, maybe a6, b5 in some positions. Rook d1, a6, bishop back to c1. It looks a little strange to play this way, but the idea is he wants the option of d4 maybe. The bishop on d2 wasn't doing much anyway. Queen to f7, rook to g1. This looks a little suspicious. Usually you allow something like this, some bad things can happen, but the game changed quite dramatically. So she took. It looks a little strange to give up the bishop for the knight, but the knight controls this important d5 square. The bishop is kind of blocked by all the pawns anyway. Pawn takes. I thought queen takes looked a little bit more normal, but it could be there were some concrete problems. Queen to h5. I'd be a little scared. I don't know about you, Ben.
Looks scary.
I would be like, rook h1, get me out, get me out. But he played bishop h1. Again, I would be a little frightened here, but these players are clearly braver than I am. So knight e7, she maneuvers her knight to g6, attacking this pawn. It looks just bad to me. And he pitches the pawn. She doesn't even take it. She plays f4, continuing to play aggressively. Takes f4, bishop g4. And this was a key moment, pinning this knight. You really can't save it without sacking the exchange. So he played queen e2 first. She took on h4. Again, notice the killer pin. Got to give up that rook. Now, at the end of all this, throws in the bishop check. You get this interesting position. She's won an exchange. But as we know, the exchange is not always so easy to win with. Sometimes you're up in exchange, but the bishops prove stronger than the rooks. I don't think that's going to happen for him here. This bishop is a really great piece, but it's just one piece. All she has to do is fix this knight, bring this rook into the game. White's king's a little weak. I would say that she's in good shape. F takes e5 was played. Knight c7, a move I like, getting that knight off the back rank. threatening the bishop. So, for example, taking this pawn would be a pretty questionable decision, allowing mates. Not something I would recommend. So he retreats. She plays knight c6, and let us see if there have been moves played since. There have been quite a few moves played since. This was last I saw it, but let's see what happened. King g2. So trying to play rook h1. She checks on f4. Note how taking this pawn would probably be a mistake due to rook h1, and this queen is actually trapped. Rook takes f2, queen takes f2 doesn't really save you. So this could have been a little bit dangerous. So she gave a check, forcing the bishop to take the knight. And once you lose the two bishops, I think it becomes a lot harder. So rook h1, she takes g5 with check, saves her h-pawn. I'd say it's pretty bad news for white. Takes on d6, rook f8, doubling. You may not try to take this pawn just yet, but it's always under attack now. White plays rook h2, queen e5, d-pawn's weak, c-pawn's weak. He tries to take on b7, which is understandable. Sometimes when you have a bad position, you have to just try to take pawns whenever you can, even if it looks dangerous. She eliminates the d6 pawn, and then comes in. And this was the drawback to taking this b7 pawn, that now this rook comes in. Again, I understand the decision, but it looks quite nasty. So check, and this is where we have it. White played king f2, and she played queen to b8. So she's covering queen e8 check. You would not want to allow that in a lot of situations, although for the moment the rook can come back. And I would say this is close to resignable. The rook b2 is a huge threat, pinning the queen. I'm not exactly sure what white's going to do to save himself here. This looks quite nasty.
14 minutes left on the clock for Solikidu, but only 4.5 for Khamrhulov.
And it was a complex position, it's understandable, but honestly, I'm really unsure what's going to happen. So, I mean, this rook b2 check move is just a killer. I thought maybe king e3 was the best shot, trying to at least save this king. But honestly, I just don't believe in this one bit. There has to be a way to break through. It could be something as simple as moving this rook back. But the idea of king e3 is just to play bishop e4 and kind of hold on in the center and pray that nothing horrible happens to you. But honestly, there's no counterplay here. The king is weak. I think that Solikidu is going to get her second win.
Well, it looks like Khamrhulov is just made a move.
He has indeed played king e3. Let me check, actually. Nope. Queen b8. King e3 is who I played, so I don't see it on the board yet. But I'm guessing king e3 will be played, just because I don't see what else is going to be done. Yeah, you have to watch out. Rook h6 check. There's no perpetual, but as long as she controls the c5 square, there's no issue. So I would say it's, again, pretty much I think black's going to just win this game.
The young lady from Kavala, Greece, Stavroula Solikidu, are you familiar with her?
I'm not at all, actually.
Me neither. She's definitely one of the newcomers. A very friendly person. I'd love to get her in here for an interview post-game. She's definitely the game of the day here. I mean,
I would say so. I mean, she gets to 2-0, and as black, she gets a win against one of her very high-rated opponents.
So what's going on in some of the other games?
Well, I figured we could go to the IM norm section and check out. There's a game here, Matsenko against Josh Kolas, because this game is extremely crucial for the standings, as we discussed. And this is a game where, again, Matsenko is the much higher-rated player. I think he outrates Kolas by almost 300 points.
Yeah,
more than 300 points, right?
Let's do
so, and he's white.
Yeah, 350 points.
350 points, and he's white. So, not winning this game, needless to say, would be a disappointment for him. And I don't know. I mean, it's one of those. It's a king and pawn endgame, which means it's concrete. You have to calculate it out, and I'm not totally sure. But to me, it looks like a draw. I'm guessing in this position, white plays f4, king takes f5, king here. I would imagine the king has to move back. White plays up here. And now, at the very least, I think f5 check should do the trick. If king d4, king back, king here, king back, there's no reason why either side should be winning here.
Oh yeah, total draw.
to my knowledge. So
But was this game always like this?
no, it wasn't. So let's actually go back. So we can start at the beginning. Knight f3, knight f6. A lot of knight f3s. You know, as bloody as this tournament's been, usually bloody tournaments don't have knight f3, c4 to begin. You know, usually it's more sharper starts. But okay, Catalan. So Josh Colas does something which I don't like as much in the opening. In this position, you usually have two choices. You either play bishop e7 and castle, with the idea that you later take on c4, or you take immediately, with the idea that if usually white will play queen a4 check, you have the option, you can play c6, b5, you can play knight bd7 and try to a6, b5, and you get a Catalan type position without white's pawn on d4. Kind of a quiet system. He plays bishop e7 and then takes. And this allows Matsenko to, in my opinion, just get a comfortable advantage. He plays knight a3. Now you can take this knight, but then the problem is you lost the tempo with bishop e7. And that a whole tempo is a lot. So white can just take back, and even in a position like this...
They just shook hands.
They did shake hands, so I'm assuming they drew.
It's got to be a draw.
Yeah. Matsenko's got to be disappointed with that result, I would say. But again, nice save from Josh Colas, who in my opinion had a tough game. I can fast forward a little bit to where that happened. So Colas chose not to play this, and it looks fairly safe for black, but honestly, this bishop on g2 against this bishop on c8, it's just a nice advantage for white, I believe. Typical Catalan advantage. And they ended up getting into a position where they trade a bunch of pieces. He did get his bishop out, but after all these trades, he has to allow bishop takes f6, and he has a weak king. Now, the weak king by itself, not always such a big deal. Sometimes these double pawns aren't so much. If the queens ever trade, it's just basically nothing. But I think in this position, white is the one who's having fun. White's in the driver's seat. I thought he should play just rook c1. Very simple, attacking the queen. If the queen tries to hide out over on the queen side, you can maybe play on, on the king side, you could play on the queen side. If the queen drops back, then you try to attack the king. So you kind of tease both sides. You threaten to attack the king side. If black gets too defensive, you switch to the other side of the board. And that's kind of how you play these positions. But it's always very close to just being drawn. And I think that Colas played pretty nicely. Just kind of sat, doubled his rooks. And again, I thought that white was a little more comfortable, but he wasn't really able to do too much. They got this position. And you can see here that Matsenko actually chose to trade. And I'm guessing he just didn't really see an alternative. Keep in mind, if he allows queen d5 check, queen d1 check, queen d5, and it trades to a rook endgame, most likely a lot of them will be drawn. So unless he can win the a-pawn, the rook endgames are very drawish. So they got here, and I thought that this would actually be a simple draw. But when I played through it a little bit more, I saw that white's queen got to f6, like this. And I thought that if the king moved back, this h-pawn was coming up. Maybe some slight chances, but ultimately still very close to a draw. This did indeed happen, but Colas played queen f5. And it's one of those where you allow the double pawns in the king and pawn endgame, but apparently he calculated it out. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know if this was all perfectly played, but apparently h6, and the double pawns are just not important enough here. The key is that you have spare moves. And in this position, black has king e6, king f6 till the end of time. And as long as you have those spare moves, it's going to be kind of difficult for your opponent to do much. If he can get f3, g4, g5, and get that outside h-pawn, he's going to have winning chances. But apparently this was not the case. He played g4. What else? And black played f6. This is kind of clever, because if he did takes, maybe this would still be a draw. But now you have a much more challenging situation. If f6, you go here. King e7, you have to watch out for this move. You have to watch out for this move. I actually don't see a win here, but this is at least more dangerous, perhaps. He chose f6, allowing this capture. But notice how your extra pawn is just not useful. Black is the better king. So he could try to chase this pawn, but my suspicion is that this would have been a little bit dangerous. You can play king e4, king d5, king e6. And note that white queens with check, so gets an extra move, can take this pawn. Probably no reason to go for this for Josh. So he just played king e5 and took this pawn. And I didn't see the very end of the game. He didn't even take the pawn. He just played king d5 and they agreed to a draw. And that's certainly good enough. The pawn doesn't mean anything here. If king d3, you just go back anywhere. And the problem is you just sit between these two squares, dead draw.
There's no breakthrough.
So he defended a top position very well, and probably Matsenko didn't use the most of his chances. But again, tricky in those positions. You like to press, you want to press a long time, but ultimately one little slip, you don't really have too much.
Indeed. Josh Kolas sits with 2 international master norms and 1 grandmaster norm, which you pointed out yesterday is a token.
It certainly does count. Unless they've changed the rules very recently. Keep in mind, I pursued my titles about 10 years ago. But
and sometimes at the club, like we just learned the rules
I
changes.
still have had students who have been pursuing them. So yeah, the grandmaster norm does count towards an IM norm. It would be silly for it not to, if you think about it. So he has his norms. He just needs to get to that 2,400 FIDE mark. A couple years ago, he was very close. I think he got to 2,380 or thereabouts. But he fell off. He had a couple bad events. But if he's on the upswing again, and he's that strength, I could see him getting to 2,400 and probably beyond. So we'll see how he does.
Impressive, Josh Kolas. You know, I met him a couple years ago at the junior championship.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's a very fine young man. 19 years old. Lives in St. Louis now.
Yep.
So what else is going on this current round, round number 2?
Let me take a look. So there was this game between Torres and Chiyu that drew. Just to show you, it was kind of the only tame game we've had so far. So I can show you very quickly. It was a Nimzo Indian. He played Queen C2 Nimzo. So they play down this very classic main line. But there were a few interesting moments. So they get to this position, Rook C8. This move will look weird to people who never see these kind of moves before. But to Nimzo players, this is a perfectly normal move. The idea is you want to play C5 and take back with the rook to keep things fluid, to make this queen uncomfortable, and to make sure this knight stays guarding this knight. So it's a very common idea. And if white castles, which looks like a normal move, black can say hello, fork the bishop and queen. And the key here is that you're attacking this bishop, which means that white has to recapture. Black recaptures. Black's doing quite well in this endgame, probably a little better even. So a normal move like castles, it can actually end up in a worse position, which means you got to stay on your toes from the very opening, something a lot of players forget. White played bishop f4, c5, castles, and this was another moment which I thought was kind of interesting, because I thought that white could actually try, even before c4 maybe, knight e4 here actually didn't look unplayable to me, with the idea that if the queen goes back, and that was the idea of bishop h4, by the way, that now the bishop's defended, I didn't think this was all that easy, and to be quite honest, I'd be a little worried here as white in some positions. f4 is always on the loose, a very typical idea. I thought this was quite interesting. And of course, white could try to take this queen now, but after takes, I didn't really see too much. I thought white could try here, but honestly, that's kind of the end of it, because if you take d6, I take e2. So I thought that this was probably a decent choice for black. But she chose c5 castles, and honestly, I thought that Torres had the slight advantage. The thing is, he does have the two bishops.
Apparently, the game has been drawn.
It has been drawn. So we'll check out just to the end. I thought that here white had maybe some chances for advantage, but apparently she snuffed it out. Again, looks like a very delicate situation. Queen and rook are lined up. Bishop g3 is almost there, but this knight kind of takes care of everything. Maybe he just couldn't find much. So queen e2, knight f6. And here, they actually had a funny perpetual. So knight b5, if you take the rook, the queen hangs. Queen c6. Taking a7 looks absurdly dangerous, so it was not played. They went back. And apparently white just couldn't find anything, so he decided to call it a day, get some rest for the next round. A lot of players like to do this on double round days just because 2 rounds a day is a tough one. If you get a little bit of rest for the next round, it might work in your favor.
You've really got to figure out where to call your shots and to pace
You really
yourself.
do. I mean, I'm sure he's disappointed not to get more chances as white in this game, but honestly, he's one of the IMs. He's not playing for a norm. He doesn't have to score an outrageous amount of points. He probably just wants the rest.
Chiyu Zhou is the former Canadian women's champion, won that title a couple of years ago, and she is from Ottawa. So first time that I have seen Chiyu Zhou. who today gets a draw with black against Luis Torres.
And that's a good result. She lost a tough one to Matsenko yesterday, so she's probably glad to right the ship, get a solid draw as black against a tough player. Actually, very interesting. I talked to her for the first time recently, and apparently she lived in Finland for many years, so she actually speaks Finnish in addition to English and Mandarin. So quite an interesting character.
Yeah, world travelers, man.
Indeed. There's a really cool game going on between Turgut and Banawa. So this game, I have no idea what on earth happened in this game, because I thought that Turgut had an excellent position. And now I see he's down a queen. And maybe he's somehow magically all right down a queen, but I kind of doubt it. So let's see how on earth this happened. Because I saw it. We don't have to go through the whole thing. It was a semi-Slav. And I thought that Banawa played a very dangerous move, which I thought was instructive. He played g3. Now, g3 looks kind of normal. You want to play knight h4 and support your knight, threaten knight g6. But when I see this move and I see this bishop, I get nervous. It's just not something I'd like to do unless I really feel like I have to. Obviously, it's a move sometimes you just play, but I really think it backfired on him. Rook f8 was played, bishop c2, c5, and here I really thought Joel should have been like, you know what, I need to make sure I'm not worse. Put the pawn on d5 to kill this bishop. Probably about equal. I don't think this passed pawn's such a big deal, but honestly, I would have played it safe here, but Joel was like, nope. And honestly here, I thought that his position was very dangerous. I see this bishop, I see danger. So this all happens. Knight to g2. He played h6, very aggressive move. Knight g4. f5.
Man.
And yeah.
And this game is over. Tony Rich is declaring the result.
I would imagine that White won this game, yeah. So we'll get to the end of the game in a minute. But yeah, h3. Knight back to f6, and it could be he just backfired, He had a nice position, but he went a little too hog wild. Sometimes that happens. You like your position a little too much, try to play too aggressively, it backfires on you. But somehow, Joel won a queen here as white. So f4, e5, yeah, allowing f4, e5 is not ideal. Knight takes g6, quite a shot. The idea is if king takes, there's queen g4 action with this guy hanging, and if the queen takes, this bishop hangs. So Turgut's like, have a rook. Joel says, no thank you, I'm keeping you away from this h3 point. Obviously allowing a sack there could end up in mate. So rook takes knight. And sometimes this is just what you do. When your position, your feel is tough, it's difficult, you just kind of start sacking away and hope for the best. But apparently it didn't really work out. Joel takes way too much material, h3 is covered. He sacks the queen for one last try. But the problem is this rook just doesn't have anywhere good to go. This bishop hangs with check. And it's just too much. Notice how if rook takes g4, this still hangs with check. So he goes back, and then he resigned after. Rook d1, rook takes g4. The idea is if takes this rook, you can probably check here as well, but you can even just take this bishop. Just very simple. There's no mate, of course. And after rook takes g4, rook takes d5 check, that was the end of that. So kind of a disappointing end. I thought that Turgut could have maybe gotten 2 out of 2. But instead, his aggression backfired on him, only ended up with 1.
Have you played either of these men before?
I've played Joel, I think, a couple times. I remember we had a draw in a California tournament at some points. And Tansel Turgut actually played in a team tournament in Chicago, and I won as black. I remember that game. I sacked an exchange. It was kind of an interesting game. But I thought he was a tough player. Like, he played very solid. It took me a while to kind of get the better of him. But he definitely wasn't in a solid mood this game. He was aggro, which I like. Why not?
For sure. Joel Banawa, yeah, one of my favorite personalities who plays in these tournaments. I really enjoyed talking to him at the last Invitational, I believe it was, last year. So,
yeah, I've known Joel a long time. I actually went the U.S. Chess School run by Greg Chahadi, which goes on each year. The first U.S. Chess School, he was actually there, as was I. So I remember him from all the way back then. I want to say it was, 2007 or something, or even before that. It was quite a ways back. So I've known him quite a lot.
Well, I think we have time for one more game.
Oh, okay.
And then we have a special guest coming in to join us from the World Chess Hall of Fame.
Guest.
Oh. This guy's awesome. You wait until you hear from this guy.
I can't wait. Let me see. So, let's see. We have a lot of craziness going on.
Craziness is good, Josh.
We should, I guess, check out because we want to see Tsolakido did win. So we should definitely check that one out.
Okay. How we definitely are going to want to talk to Stavroula Tsolakido.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear her thoughts on this game and just in general, because it was quite a game. So he did play King E3, followed my suggestion, which is usually not a good sign. Black played Rook back to F8, which was what I expected also. Predicting amazing today. D4. This was less expected. I feel like trying to push your pawns is not the way to go here, but at the same time, sometimes when you're losing, you just kind of play whatever. I might have tried Rook to G2, but okay. Rook E8 check she played. Bishop E4. Takes D4 check, and this is the problem. You're getting two connected passers. That's nice, but your king is just getting trashed. So king takes D4. If pawn takes D4, I believe he was worried about this rook check. The king has to move here, and then pins everywhere, which is not pleasant. This isn't even a pin, it's a check, Josh. Way to go. Hey, we sometimes forget. It's all the same, guys. Don't worry about it. Lessons from a Grandmaster. So, queen d6 check, king e3, rook takes e4 check. He has to take with a pawn. If king takes, I'd imagine there are lots of wins, but the easiest that I see is rook e1. This is a pin. And then this is a skewer. Look at that. F takes e4, and then queen g3 check. Have to go up because have to hang on to the rook. Rook t1 check. Very nice move. And that was the end. The idea being, of course, if takes, then you skewer again. I'm making sure I'm getting it right. And if king c5, you play queen d6 main. Quite a crushing game and an impressive performance to get to 2 out of 2.
Was the mate actually played on the board?
It was not played on the board. Okay. It resigned. You always allow mate. This is the general rule. No one does it. This is proper etiquette. You always allow mate. If it's right away, you don't have to play out 20 moves to allow mate. That's ridiculous. But if there's mate in one, if it's a nice mate in particular, this mate's okay. He gets a pass. But if it's a really beautiful mate, you must allow it. I remember I had a game against John Lubrik Hammer, the Norwegian GM, and he was just... I had a good position, but I messed it up, of course, and he was just killing me. And he thought I was resigning, but I was actually playing into a really beautiful checkmate with 2 bishops.
Oh. Well, that was very nice of you.
Yes, it was. He was like, "You're not resigning?"
Very polite.
Yes, I'm a polite person.
Okay, well, let's go into our first break here in St. Louis for the Norm Congress. When we come back, we will have one of our special guests, either one of the players or the gentleman from the World Chess Hall of Fame, Nick Schleicher, who I don't think we've ever had on the air for one of these live tournaments, so it should be a lot of fun.
I'm excited either way.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll be right back. Thank you for joining us here on Chess24 and USChessChamps.com.
A question on Twitter from Damas. I should not have pronounced that. That was a bit of a trap, yeah?
For those of you who are new to chess, it might look like ba3 is an illegal move here because white advances pawn 2 squares, not 1. But it's still something we call en passant. And you can do that, but you have to do it instantly. You can't wait for a move, like let's say play king e7, king g2, and now try, because I could do it.
I'm sorry. This is too funny for words.
This is a software glitch? I'm pretty sure there's not a lot.
Lawrence. Hello, Lawrence. Yeah, I'll play 4 against Lawrence. And now he's going to play something against me which we discussed at length during the course of my stay. Yeah, he told me this is excellent. d5, this was what I was kind of hoping for, because now I think e5 is quite strong. No, Lawrence, this is not how chess works. Sadly, it would be much, much more fun if chess actually worked like this. But I don't think it does. Or maybe it does. Well, that's me regretting what I just said. How did I get from there to here is a little bit beyond me. And what's worse, I will never hear the end of it. My quality of life has just gone downhill tremendously because I'm actually sharing the office with the guy.
in a one-tank trip. In a nearby city you won't want to skip. St. Louis is the stop for non-stop fun. So much fun for your family, infinity plus a ton. There's museums full of art and super fun slides. Upside down concretes, twisty turny rides. Houses full of magic, some with butterflies. Gardens growing flowers, parks with giant eyes. St. Louis is the stop for non-stop fun. So much fun for your family, infinity plus a ton.
Be surprised, be intrigued, be delighted. The World Chess Hall of Fame in St. Louis is nothing you'd expect and everything you love. 3 galleries highlight the history, culture, and creativity behind the game. Explore chess in ways you never imagined. It's a one-of-a-kind cultural institution where rare artifacts and world-class art play together. The World Chess Hall of Fame. Mind, art, experience.
A question on Twitter from Damas. I should not have pronounced that. That was a bit of a trap, yeah?
For those of you who are new to chess, it might look like ba3 is an illegal move here because white advances pawn 2 squares, not 1. But it's a little something we call en passant. And you can do that, but you have to do it instantly. You can't wait for a move, like let's say play king e7, king g2, and now try, because I couldn't do it.
I'm sorry. This is too funny for words.
This is a software glitch? I'm pretty sure there's not a lot.
Lawrence. Hello, Lawrence. Yeah, I'll play 4 against Lawrence. And now he's going to play something against me which we discussed at length during the course of my stay. Yeah, he told me this is excellent. d5, this was what I was kind of hoping for, because now I think e5 is quite strong. No, Lawrence, this is not how chess works. Sadly, it would be much, much more fun if chess actually worked like this. But I don't think it does. Or maybe it does. Well, that's me regretting what I just said. How did I get from there to here is a little bit beyond me. And what's worse, I will never hear the end of it. My quality of life has just gone downhill tremendously because I'm actually sharing the office with the guy.
Welcome back to the 2018 St. Louis Norm Congress, right here in the chess capital of the United States, St. Louis, Missouri. I'm Ben Simon, alongside my good friend, sort of coworker, I guess, and first-time guest on a live tournament broadcast, exhibitions manager for the World Chess Hall of Fame, Nick Schleicher. Nick, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you have one of the most interesting jobs on the entire chess campus, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. You build walls. You build these exhibits basically from the ground up, right?
Yeah, I don't do most of the building anymore, but I do the planning of the exhibition layouts in conjunction with the curators, Shannon and Emily.
So how did you get involved with the World Chess Hall of Fame?
I went to art school, and I came back to St. Louis and was looking for a job in the arts somehow. Someone tipped me off to the Hall of Fame being a young organization, so I applied as a gallery attendant and worked my way up to preparator after about 6 months, and now I've been exhibitions manager, and I've been here for close to 5 years.
And you weren't a chess guy coming into this whole thing?
No, I mean, I knew how to play chess, but I wasn't a chess guy.
Well, you know, it's good that the chess world hasn't driven you crazy yet.
No, I mean, the chess world's really exciting, especially being at the center of it all.
So the Hall of Fame always has 3 really cool exhibits going on, with the Hall of Fame itself on the very top floor, but then the other 2 floors are just galleries. Tell us about the exhibitions going on right now.
Typically the way the exhibitions are laid out, the first floor is more contemporary art as it relates to chess, the second floor is more popular culture as it relates to chess, and the third floor is like chess history specific. Right now our first floor exhibition is an exhibition of prints by Victor Vasarely, who is an op artist. He's uses patterns and kind of interesting mathematical ways to kind of fool your eye. And he did a chessboard, so we have the chessboard on display as well. It's really cool, so you can check that out. And the second floor exhibition is a fashion exhibition right now called Pinned. We had 6 designers design a chess uniform, and they had a competition to see who came up with kind of the best one, and they had they were paired with Grandmasters, and so they kind of told them what they like and don't like about what they wear when they're playing chess and what they kind of want, maybe a little more mobility whenever they're moving around. So those designs are on display, and that exhibition was really cool because it was the first time we did curved walls. Shannon came to me and was just like, hey, I want curved walls in the exhibition. What can you do to pull this off? So
Shannon Bailey, of course, is the chief
Bailey,
curator,
the chief
of
curator.
the Hall of Fame.
She's the guiding master of the ship, and we came up with a number of designs and settled on these designs and kind of had a construction company, RG Ross, come in and build the walls for us, and it looks beautiful. And so then the third floor exhibition is the Olympiad exhibition, Americans in the Olympiad, so it's focusing on the Americans' participation in the chess Olympiads, kind of coming off of our big victory in 2016.
Yeah, 2016 was an amazing year for U.S. chess.
Yeah.
The first year that Russia, or back then it was the Soviet Union, it was the first year that they were involved in the Olympiad that we won gold, and the first in many decades. So it was very impressive in 2016.
And they got third, right? I believe so.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right there. I kind of blanked there for a second.
And so those exhibitions are all up, and they're very exciting. And so right now we're working on plans for the spring exhibitions. First floor is going to be an exhibition of chess sets from Perling, which is a luxury chess company. They make these kind of bespoke, fantastic chess sets. So they've paired with a number of artists to do chess sets that are kind of hand-painted, handcrafted. And so we're going to do an exhibition of those. There's going to be a cool VR set in there, some neon chess sets, and some really cool kind of takes on chess, but a lot of them are kind of rooted in the traditional kind of chess boards. Second floor, we're going to do a really, really cool exhibition of Staunton chess pieces. We're working with a couple collectors of Staunton chess sets. So that one's still in the works. I can't tell you too much about that. And our third floor is going to be celebrating 10 years of the St. Louis Chess Club and Scholastic Center, the Singfield Effect.
I saw a little bit of a sneak preview. I won't divulge anything, but that looks like it might be really cool.
That's going to be really cool. It's going to be nice to kind of step back. And I've only been here for 6 of those years, so stepping back and seeing kind of what really has happened to create St. Louis and put St. Louis on the map as the center of the chess world.
And those 3 exhibitions you're talking about coming up are not too far away. In fact, if you're interested in the Victor Vassarelli or the PIN exhibits, the Global Moves Americans in Chess Olympiads exhibits, you should come really soon because you only have a few weeks.
Yeah, they close the end of March, and the new shows are opening April 12th, just a couple days before the U.S. Championships.
That should be really awesome. When people come for the U.S. Championships, I guess it's synced up on purpose, right? Because you got a lot of people out of town coming to see these exhibits, and it's really cool to see what's going on at the Hall of Fame. And Nick, a lot of people don't realize at art galleries, at museums, there's a lot of hard work put into these exhibits. What are some of the hardest parts or the challenges of your work? I know you do a lot.
The challenges are always creating something new and exciting. Every exhibition we've done has been radically different. I mean, we don't have any kind of cookie-cutter exhibitions. They're all new and they're all challenging, which is the fun part because every 6 months you're learning something new. You're working with new display methods, new artworks, new artists, and that's the funnest part as well as the most challenging part.
Well, if you're ever in St. Louis, right across the street from the Chess Club and Scholastic Center is the World Chess Hall of Fame. There's really no place like it. Nick, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And let's go to a break. When we come back, Josh Friedel will be back for more analysis, maybe even an interview.
A question on Twitter from Damas. I should not have pronounced that. That was a bit of a trap, yeah?
For those of you who are new to chess, it might look like ba3 is an illegal move here because white advances pawn 2 squares, not 1. But it's a little something we call en passant. And you can do that, but you have to do it instantly. You can't wait for a move, like let's say play king e7, king g2, and now try, because could I do it?
I'm sorry. This is too funny for words.
This is a software glitch? I'm pretty sure there's not allowed.
Lawrence. Hello, Lawrence. Yeah, I'll play 4 against Lawrence. And now he's going to play something against me which we discussed at length during the course of my stay. Yeah, he told me this is excellent. D5, this was what I was kind of hoping for, because now I think E5 is quite strong. No, Lawrence, this is not how chess works. Sadly, it would be much, much more fun if chess actually worked like this. But I don't think it does. Or maybe it does. Well, that's me regretting what I just said. How did I get from there to here is a little bit beyond me. And what's worse, I will never hear the end of it. My quality of life has just gone downhill tremendously because I'm actually sharing the office with the guy.
There's a weekend vacation, a one-tank trip in a nearby city you won't want to skip. St. Louis is the stop for non-stop fun. So much fun for your family, infinity plus a ton. There's museums full of art and super fun slides. Upside-down concretes, twisty, turny rides. Houses full of magic, some with butterflies. Gardens growing flowers, parks with giant eyes. St. Louis is the stop for non-stop fun. So much fun for your family, infinity plus a ton.
A moment comes in chess when you need to test yourself at a different level. Chess 24 Premium offers the tools that you need to reach your maximum potential. From hundreds of interactive video lessons to becoming part of the Chess 24 community. You can analyze with friends or coach your students live. You get 24/7 coverage of chess news and events, access to premium analysis and commentary, and the chance to interact with grandmasters and other top players and coaches. Get advice from the best and even challenge them to a battle. Be the best chess player you can be. It's time to level up your game with Chess 24 Premium membership. A moment comes in chess when you need to test yourself at a different level. Chess 24 Premium offers the tools that you need to reach your maximum potential. From hundreds of interactive video lessons to becoming part of the Chess 24 community. You can analyze with friends or coach your students live. You get 24/7 coverage of chess news and events, access to premium analysis and commentary, and the chance to interact with grandmasters and other top players and coaches. Get advice from the best and even challenge them to a battle. Be the best chess player you can be. It's time to level up your game with Chess 24 Premium membership.
All right, and we're back right here in St. Louis for the 2018 Norm Congress. Ben Simon and Grandmaster Josh Friedel here with the calls. And we have a result in, Josh.
We've had quite a few results in. In the GM Norm section, we had John Bartholomew draw against Pavlo Vorontsov. We mentioned it before, Mark Paragua beat Daniel Gorevich. Tatav Abrahamian just beat Grandmaster Akshat Chandra.
Big win.
Definitely a big win, and there was a key moment from that game I'd like to pull up if we have a bit of time. Patel Borosh is still going on. Patel is up a lot of pawns for an exchange, so he probably will have very good winning chances. And as we mentioned, Stavrula already won against Khamrakulov. Yeah, so in Tatev's game, there was this moment. Tatev's down a pawn and on the attack, pretty much where she likes to be. And at this moment, this was a really cool situation where it looked like Chandra has a really nice resource with Rook D1. Akshat, I'm sure, was, maybe he already didn't like his position, but probably he was defending on this resource from a long time back. But the way it often works in these attacks is one resource can decide whether it's good or bad, and whether the attack works or not. And in this case, Tatev has a really beautiful shot with knight takes e5 check. And again, this is something which, if you don't plan it a while back, it's not such good news. And here, I think there's just big problems. The king, if a king moves anywhere, it gets checked by the queen and harassed pretty horribly. And after knight takes knight, which is what he played, queen h5 check, and you have a beautiful double attack on the f7 king and the d1 rook. She won this rook, and took her a while, but eventually reeled in the point. So a good recovery from a pretty bad loss yesterday to Boros.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Chandra really is probably hurting a bit because last night he probably should have beaten Paragua and he only drew, and now that result is really biting him because he's half out of 2, and obviously plenty of tournament to go, but I'm sure that Akshat is a bit disappointed with his result.
Absolutely. The former U.S. junior champion, U.S. championship player, one of the most well-known players around St. Louis, relocated here a year or two ago. So yes, Akshat Chandra has to be a little bit down on that, but good for Tatev.
Good for Tatev, and again, I mean, I'm not sure for her, like, she's chasing a Grandmaster norm, but her rating obviously is way away. She's still trying to make the rating for her IM norm, but she's someone where when she gets on a roll, she can win lots of games in a row. So she, that big win is probably going to be crucial for her. And we'll see if Akshat can bounce back. My guess is I'm sure he can. He's a professional, but not going to be so easy.
All right. What else has happened in this round?
So there have been a lot of action. Let's go actually to so in the IM norm, we have this game. This was a really crazy game where finally Jacobson lost as black. This was pretty rough. It was in the opening. Just to play through it rather briefly, it was this line which has become fashionable, where against the Grunfeld you just fianchetto, and it's almost like coffeehouse chess is what it looks like to me. It's one of those things where you would play it in Blitz, but in real games you're like, nah, I'll play a normal opening. But now, because computers are telling us, you know what, some of these coffeehouse systems are not so bad. You just put the bishop on h6 and say, well, how are you going to castle, bro? And it's kind of...
It is frustrating.
It is frustrating, right? Like, you have to deal with this. So, to my knowledge, I think there are ideas with knight g4 and queen d6 in some positions, and possibilities like this in order to try to do stuff. But that's not what black chose. And ultimately, black's king just ended up under fire. This all happened, e5. And here I thought he maybe had to try, in this position rather, like knight g8 is already kind of rough. And here I thought really he had to just try taking, knight e7, castle, just try to get out, try to get out. This is a little bit weak. But he played f6, which I thought was absurdly risky, and then king e7. And when I saw king e7, I'm like, man. And sometimes it happens. You don't like your position, so you make extreme decisions. Sometimes it's correct, but other times I think it's just too much. And in this case, I think that the king on e7 is just a poor piece.
What was his plan here?
I think his point was to defend the queen so that he could take this pawn. But honestly, white has so many good options here. White took, and these pawns may look nice, but with a king in the center, you never want to advance them. And white has ideas like f4. Even here, I think f4 would have been a decent choice. Instead, he played rook d1 and knight e4, which I thought was also kind of nice. Puts the knight on g5, bishop g4, and black's king is just airy for the rest of the game. The problem with kings like this is there's no safety. You don't actually ever get to safety. You just have to hope you don't get mated the whole game. And it's hard to play well, and eventually he did reel in the point. In this position, he won a pawn. I thought that black did a pretty good job of actually getting his king secure. He has the center, but honestly, he's still too open. This rook side of the game, he has practical chances, but that's about it. And eventually, as we see, queen a2, kind of a clever move, pinning this pawn with e4 ideas. He has to make sure these sacks don't work on f3, but my guess would be that there's just nothing here. And again, a little bit, it looks kind of nice, but really you're not doing much. And eventually the position just gives out on him. Takes c5. I mean, you're positionally lost down a pawn, and king is weak, and he snuck an e4 pawn using this pin on the rook, and then brought the knight back, and black decided to understandably call it a day. So kind of a rough result for Brandon, who I believe is 0-2 now. So he's going to have some climbing back to do, but as we've seen in this event, games go both ways. They're really volatile, so he could easily win the next 2 games, so we'll see how that goes. Otherwise, we already went over the draw. Justin Wang has kind of an interesting game going. He is black against Josiah Stearman. And this is pretty crazy, honestly, because black has very dangerous-looking pawns. White has dangerous-looking pawns. There's an adage that all rook endgames are drawn. Well, clearly they're not talking about rook endgames where both sides have connected fast pawns. Then all rook endgames are insane, is the actual saying. And here, I don't know what to tell you as far as what's going on. This requires lots of concrete calculation. I just looked at this position, but I would say, honestly, I just don't have an idea. My guess would be somehow this a-pawn is just really annoying to stop in general. Black has a couple extra pawns for the moment. Maybe they don't come into play, maybe they do. But I would say that Justin is pushing for the win here. But at the same time, anything can happen in these endgames. Usually what matters more is not the pawn count, but how far advanced your pawns are. The one advantage Josiah has is both of his pawns are pretty far advanced. But I would say that ultimately, probably Justin's the one trying to win.
Justin Wang has one norm. He earned that norm last year in St. Louis. So we know him very well.
So he already knows how to get a norm here.
Yeah.
And he's 12, he already knows how to get norms. I didn't learn to get norms till I was, 17. I was a late bloomer compared to him. But see how it goes.
I like Justin's trademark hat.
That's a kid thing. They do this now. The kids wear these hats. They wear them low. Sometimes they do hoodies, Jeffrey Zhang style.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's scary. Kids are scary enough. You guys do not have to wear the hoods and the caps. Just look normal. You're scary enough. You do not need to scare us older players anymore. Please don't do it.
Our photographer, Austin Fuller, was taking player portraits yesterday, and Justin showed up with his mother. His mom says, "You want to take the hat off for the photo?" He said, "No." They just took it with the hat on. And I said, I don't know that we've done that before.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting, but it's his trademark. That is Justin Wang.
See, it's one thing, if I wear a hat, I just look ridiculous. I still do it, but I look ridiculous. Justin Wang, it's like a scary thing. I'm frightened enough.
I used to think of you as having a trademark hat.
I did, but it became a trademark just because I wore it, and like every round I showed up, and the game was the minor focus. Talking about my hat was the main focus of each game when I played. It was a U.S. Championship one year.
Yeah.
And it was quite something.
Yeah.
But
well, if players out there, if you want the commentators to talk about you, wear an interesting piece of clothing, like a hat or maybe a funny necklace or something.
Yeah.
Glasses, Hikaru Nakamura.
Well, or have funny hair. I mean, Tatev Abrahamyan's hair is the subject of discussion every time. Now it's blue. Before it was a little pink. Before it was purple.
The purple.
I'm telling you, it's the way to attract attention from commentators, especially if they're easily distracted.
Indeed. Well, we're still waiting on some of these players to talk to. They have not arrived as of yet. Hopefully we'll be able to chat with them shortly. But in the meantime, we're just looking at the games. We're analyzing round 2. It's in progress here at the Norm Congress.
Yeah. Why don't we check out this game between Adi Patel and Dinesh Borosh? So this game was kind of weird. I think there was a time pressure phase around here. Let me go to a good point because I don't want to go through the whole thing necessarily. Yeah, so they had this point, and I'm guessing it was time pressure. I don't know. At some point, I kind of liked Dinesh's position, but things became kind of weird. He played rook e2, so I guess White's up 2 pawns. Adi Patel is as White, so that's a pretty big advantage. Somehow I thought that Black was going to get the c pawn. The a pawn was a little weak, but for some reason something went wrong here. So he played knight d4, forking the 2 pieces. So far it looks pretty reasonable. Bishop h7 check. Notice how g5 hangs with check, but once the king moves, you have the fork to deal with. And I don't think he wanted to mess with that. So he played the check, rook e1. Somehow he's just holding everything together, just barely. Then he plays rook h8. Looks like he's going to win material, right? Bishop d3, hitting this rook. So now, if he played rook takes c1, if you play rook takes h5, I believe he was worried about takes. And now the problem is, if you take pin or a skewer. I'm just kidding. It's a skewer. And
It's tough to tell.
it's tough to tell. Only I'm bad at it. Don't worry about it. So yeah, bishop and knight attacked, and you're going to lose it. Notice how the rook placement on h5 is not ideal for helping yourself out in these situations. And quite something. So a lot of nice resources found by Adi. Rook takes c1. Rook takes g5 check. Notice how if you take back either rook, you take the other rook, and Danish is simply up a piece. King f6. Rook takes d5. This is the problem when you're down lots of pawns. Your opponent can afford to give back material. So now, if you take this rook, I take this rook, I'm just up a bunch of pawns, right? He plays knight f3 check, and rook takes e1. So it looks like black's at least won the exchange. But look at all these pawns. White has 3 pawns at the moment for the exchange, and I believe he won even more. So g4. He gives up a2, which is not a very meaningful pawn. And they trade these pawns, and honestly, I would say that Danish has some minor drawing chances, but that's all they are. I would say that objectively, this should be probably winning for white. And they've made a bunch of moves since then, so let me update this board. And this is kind of where we are. So you can see that he managed to hold on to this c6 pawn, this h6 pawn rolls, and quite honestly, I think Danish is probably going to resign relatively soon, because he has to move his rook back to guard this, and then the king runs up, and it's going to be all she wrote. So a nice win by Adi, who recovered from a tough loss yesterday.
Indeed. Adi is sitting at 2 norms, 2 Grandmaster norms, the international master himself, Adi Patel. So, yeah, that is a very nice win for him.
And his rating's pretty close, so I'd imagine if he makes a norm here, his rating's probably going to cross. So we could be witnessing a GM in the making. But, of course, still a long way to go. 1 out of 2 is still a long way from 6.5 out of 9, which is what he'd need. So
rating is 2478, just 22 points to go
yeah,
to cross that threshold. 15-year-old Adi Patel could end up being the story of this event.
Could be, but remember, he lost the first round, so 1 out of 2 is just the beginning.
Yes.
He could go up, he could go down, he could stay even.
Should not get ahead, yes.
We should not get ahead of ourselves, but at the same time, it looks like he will get the win today with some nice resources, because it looked like Danish had his pieces in trouble despite being down some pawns, but he found lots of nice tactics and seemed to work out in his favor.
Very nice.
I'm expecting a resignation relatively soon, so. Then again, maybe he has some crazy ideas. I was looking at a bunch of stalemates yesterday, so now I'm looking for stalemate, but I don't think there's stalemate with the king on d6.
Boros just did a funny hand motion. He just was like, he did one of these things. I don't know what that was. But he's made his move.
He just saw Star Wars. He's trying to...
using the force on the pieces.
I don't know. At some point, you try everything. You know,
Yeah.
you get desperate enough. You try to do whatever you can. So.
Well, that plan didn't work. But
yeah, I mean, okay, the game's updated a little bit. Yeah, I mean, the king got in, as I said would happen, and then now it's just going to be over. At the moment, you can't just play king up because there's checks, but there's so many ways to win this position. One of the easiest is actually just to play bishop d5, put the bishop on g8, and that's going to be pretty much the end.
Right.
So I'm suspecting that's what he'll try, but there are many ways to win. So it's really up to him how he wants to finish the game. But I suspect he will finish it within a couple moves.
And they're moving quite rapidly now.
Yeah, I would imagine it's going to be hand out pretty soon. Ah, he played.
And there it is.
Yeah. Yep. So I think he gave up the f pawn and tried to check on f6, but the king moved back, and judging from the look on the game, so Adi Patel recovers, and Boros gets knocked back. So they both have 1 out of 2, because Boros had a nice win yesterday against Tatev Abrahamyan. I thought that was actually one of the few one-sided, couldn't go really either way games. Like I thought he just played a really nice game and won comfortably, but a tough loss for him today.
So in the GM norms section, how many games do we have left?
So in the GM norms section, we have, I think that's all of them. So we
they're
have
all done.
Yep. So just to recap, John Bartholomew drew against Vorontsov. Mark Paragua beat Daniel Gorevich. Tatev Abrahamyan beat Akshat Chandra.
I understand we have standings. Let's take a look while we have standings after 2 rounds have been completed in the Grandmaster norm section. Yes,
I'm not used to having such visuals, so for me, I
Very
was
nice
just reading them
visuals,
down.
yes.
Now,
Thank
yes,
you,
now I
Isaac
don't have to
Schatz,
say
yes.
anything. Yes, very nice. So Lakidu leading the event with 2 out of 2. Very, very nice result on her way to a GM norm. Again, we don't want to jinx anyone, but looking good. Vorontsov and Paragua, 2 of the GMs, half a point back. Everyone else, a lot of people on 1, and Gurevich is at 0 out of 2, but I don't think he's going to stay there. Too strong a player.
Yeah, and you really can't stress how big of this this early lead that Stavroula Stolikidu has. One of the WGMs, one of the last seeds, just by rating.
Yeah.
And now she's in clear lead, first place after just 2 rounds.
Yep.
But there's more games to be played. There's one more game tonight at 5 o'clock.
Indeed, and she played quite a game, so, I mean, I don't know. She's got to be feeling good about herself after beating one of the top seeds with black in such crushing fashion. She's got to be very confident. Sometimes that can backfire depending on the type of player, but sometimes you can really get her on a roll, and if she gets another win, I'll tell you, no one's going to want to play her. She's going to be tough to beat.
And how about the IM norm section? What's our status in round 2?
So our status there, so looking at those games, so Jacobson lost to Grabinski, as we said. Josiah Stearman is still playing against Justin Wang. I believe Justin's going to win this game, though. That's just too many pawns. We saw it before where he had this position, but after King C7, you can't take with the rook is the key, because after rook takes King D7, you catch these pawns. You have way too many. So he tried E6, but this A pawn, as I mentioned, is just a strong pawn. You can't ignore it. And it's tough. This king is just a little too close. So he played check, King C6, rook back, B5, rook A8, King D6. So now these pawns are going to get taken care of. It's just too much. So I'm suspecting that Justin is going to win this game as black and get himself back to 50%. Matsenko drew against Kolas, a nice result for Josh, as we mentioned. Chiyu as black drew against Torres, probably a result both of them are okay with. That was the quickest game. And Joel Benawa beat Tensel Turgut, the oldest player in both events. But who had a nice position. I thought that Joel got a bit fortunate that, he wasn't punished a little bit after the opening, but at the same time, he took what was given to him, and Turgut played a bit too aggressively. But the only game still going is this Justin Wang game. So this is the last game, and it looks like Justin's going to bring in the point relatively soon.
The 12-year-old from Katy, Texas, National Master Justin Wang.
Yep, 12 years old.
I think Josiah was laughing there about something. He kind of smiled at him. I don't know what that was about.
I'm not sure. Well, I can tell you that younger players often have interesting board habits. I'm not saying he's one of them, but
we don't know. We don't have audio, but yeah,
we don't have
what
audio.
Could he be doing?
It could be anything. You don't know. So all I know is they're younger players. Just you don't have to do any of this. You're already good.
Foot tapping, if it's a swivel chair swiveling, bottle crunching. That's an interesting one.
That's a good one. They played more moves. I should update the board. So it was rook E8. So he took this pawn, E7, going back. And the problem is that rook endgames are drawish, but you don't really need this pawn. This F pawn is already going to get far. The king's cut just way too far away. And that's, as we know, is usually just the end of things. White tried to check, but these checks, of course, do nothing. Rook G6 does absolutely nothing except encourage the pawn forward. I think it's a matter of time till he resigns. Usually the only try is to bring the rook to the first, but now even if you just play F5, give it check, King H3, you go behind, and now your rook simply goes behind. Note how this king is way too far. If this king were close, you'd have some drawing chances. As it is, this pawn's just going to run up the board. For example, if takes, you run, attack the rook, F3, F2, game is pretty much over. Not so many chances. Rook G6 certainly doesn't help matters. So Justin's defending his B pawn. I don't know if that's something I would even bother with, but of course there's nothing wrong with it. And now what he can do is he can move the king back, put the pawn here, rook here, this king's cut off, this guy's defended, king walks up. Also an easy way to win. It's kind of, dealer's choice in these positions. You don't have to win one way or another. There are many ways to bring home the point. There are many ways to get it done. So it's kind of a matter of taste, a matter of how sadistic one player is. Whether they want to draw it out or win as quickly as possible, you don't know. But anyway, it should be a pretty easy win for black.
Well, see right here, I'm looking at the emotions on these players. Justin Wang there on the right, side of the camera. He is just as confident as a 12-year-old can exude. And Josiah Stearman is clearly distraught. He had his hands on his head and laying back in his seat there for a second, but he's still playing on.
I mean, they're still concentrating. Why not play on a few moves? There's a reputation kids have for being bad at endgames. Let's see if it's true. But I think that Justin's more than competent enough to get this one done. This one is just too many things are wrong with White. Like, White's way too many moves from the draw. Usually it's a bad sign. If you could take off the B pawn, it's still a dead loss. That that things are not so good.
Right.
But anyway, let's keep our board updated here.
So how close do you think we are to seeing a resignation here? You think he's going to play it out?
I mean, I'd say he might play it out a few moves to see if he brings his king up. He might try to cut off the king, but honestly, even if it's allowed, you play f4, rook f5, and the pawn starts running. You have to run back quickly before the pawn gets you. Right. There are just too many things wrong. Like you'd need black to make a really bad move here to have a chance, and a bad move might be just hanging one of the pawns. So it doesn't seem very likely.
The players are putting down a lot of moves here on the board. There's not a lot of choices to make, so
indeed not.
Playing toward the end.
Yep, they're going. And I suspect, again, especially kids, like they tend to play things out a little longer. But there's nothing wrong with it. See if your opponent knows what they're doing. It looks like Justin's king is moving up the board. He's showing more confidence than I'd have up a rook probably, so he's on track, I think, for his first win.
We might be able to get a full screen shot of the players there. Maybe we can see the board a little bit better. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. This board's not updating as fast as the live camera will, which should not be surprising.
It's like those Blitz tournaments. They're like, we're not even doing the digital board.
We're not even bothering.
Straight at that
but
board.
Looks like Justin's got it. Oh, pinning the pawn. Look at this trickery. Unfortunately, it's easy to move the king back and take care of things, which it looks like he'll do. Very confident move, king e3. Yeah, I think that we're going to get a resignation fairly soon.
Justin has a sort of flair to him, It's hard to kind of put into words.
Yeah, he's shaking. He's still... The thing is, I find that when you're close to the win, even if you know you've got it, you still feel a little nervous.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You always feel nervous until the hand shoots out, until you're done, and then you have the release of emotions, no matter how winning it is. At least that's my feeling, and I think when you're a kid, it's even more true.
A couple of years ago, I'm definitely not on the level of these players, but I defeated my highest rated opponent, and it was clearly a one endgame, but I was like
but you're still
trembling
nervous,
the entire
exactly.
time. Yeah,
I've had this, especially when I'm playing like some of the stronger GMs that I've beaten, and it's like you get nervous towards the end, and it never goes away. The only thing you can do is help control your nerves. Really focus on the position. Take your time, not play too quickly, not play too slowly, because getting low on time can ruin your win. Just kind of maintain that pace, maintain your nerves. It takes some practice, but really, that's what it comes down to. Position like this, it's kind of hard to mess up, but there are always ways you can do it. So it's like you spend...
And the game's over.
Yeah.
We have a resignation.
Yeah. So Justin won the game. So we can probably pull up the standings of this section pretty soon. And... we actually had a draw in this section this time. It was these players. They're getting more draws. We had 2 draws in this section. Can you?
Well,
believe
how
it?
about that?
2 draws in this section. I didn't think we'd have 2 draws all tournament in this section.
Well, let's take a look at the standings indeed for the International Master Norm section after the second round.
Yep. So we got Metsenko still in the lead, but gave up a draw as White. I'm sure he's not super happy about that. But Josh Kolos is happy. He's tied for the lead still. Long way for anyone to get norms, but they're on the right track. Luis Torres also drew against GU, so that's there. The only 1-0 point, and that's Brandon Jacobson. But again, 2350 rated in this section. Kind of like Daniel Gorievich in the top section. I don't see him staying at 0. So we'll see. And players that won, their tournaments can really go either way. So.
And for you fans watching on the internet at uschesschamps.com, you know that there is another round later on tonight. We're not going to be on the air to cover it, but we'll have the results for tomorrow's broadcast at 2 p.m. Now, tonight, we do have the pairings for round 3. If we can take a look at 5 p.m. Central for the Grandmaster Norm. What do you think of these matchups here, Josh?
So I like a lot of them. Solakito's the one to watch. She's 2-0. White against John Bartholomew, who's one of those slightly lower-rated players, but obviously 2450 or so, very solid. And I can tell you, I've played against John many times. I've always had a tough time beating him. I maybe beat him once, maybe twice. But honestly, he's a tough guy to beat. Even when he's playing badly, he never plays that badly. He always keeps it solid. So, you know, again, if she keeps her play, she might win that game, but it's not going to be easy. So I think that'll be a good one to watch, see if she can crack his defenses. Gorievich, 0 out of 2, is white against Tatev, who's the lowest rated in the section by a lot. But Tatev just got her win. We'll see if he can capitalize or if she can keep her roll going. And Chandra against Patel also. Patel just got his win. Chandra just lost a tough one, but he's white. He's going to want to bounce back. So we have a lot of players who, some are on a roll, some just lost a tough one, and they're playing each other. So we'll see if the trend continues or if the players who lost can bounce back.
Is momentum a real thing in chess, Josh?
For sure. And I would say that it depends on certain types of players. Some players really rely on momentum. They get wins and they just get more wins, more wins. A lot of players are like that. Others sometimes suffer from getting wins. Like, they get too confident. I've definitely had this happen to me where if I win a bunch of games, I'm actually more prone to lose. Not because I'm playing a stronger player, but just because I'm a little too confident. I maybe make decisions too easily. I'm not careful enough. So I have to really watch out for that. Whereas if I lose 2 or 3 games, sometimes, I mean, I don't lose that many in a row very often, but when it happens, I'm actually playing a little safer. I might not get that win, but it's going to be maybe tougher to beat me than if I had won games. I remember this Korchnoi saying, which was excellent: I lose 1 game, it's tough to beat me. I lose 2 games, it's almost impossible to beat me. But if I lose 3 games, anyone can beat me. So apparently, there's a line where you lose so many, you can just lose to anyone. And that can happen. If you're playing really badly, you can just lose to anyone. But as far as coming back, some players actually play well after a loss. Others, a loss really gets them down and they're more vulnerable. So it really depends on the person.
Mike Kummer used to tell the stories during his lectures of when he was at a tournament and he was paired against a person who was definitely on tilt, and not in a good way. So that played in his favor. Our second section, the International Master Norm, tonight at 5 p.m., round number 3. Here are the pairings that you will see tonight. Justin Wang and Aaron Grabinski. These pairings here, Josh, what are your thoughts?
So there are 3 leaders. Even though this was the bloody section at first, there are 3 people tied for first between Kolas, Torres, and Matsenko. And it's going to be interesting because Kolas is white against Torres. Are they going to play it safe and kind of maybe not necessarily try to draw, but not take too many risks? Or is Torres really going to feel like he wants to win that game? Is Kolas going to really press hard? I'm interested to see that game. Matsenko's the other leader, black against Turgut, who just lost a tough one. Is Turgut going to, as you say, go on tilt? Probably not someone that experienced, but I'll be interested to see that one as well. And the top board, Justin Wang, if he can continue his run going against Grabinski, and we'll see. I mean, it'll be a tough one, but lots of good games on both sides, I think.
Indeed. And while we await the results of round number 3 this evening, we'll get ready to see you again tomorrow at 2 p.m. for round number 4. And remember to check out the whole schedule, the prize fund, the pairings, the results. It's all on uschesschamps.com. So, this broadcast was produced by the world's greatest B team. Tammy Hyde is our IT advisor. Isaac Schrantz for sound and graphics. Our technical director is Danny Machuca. For Grandmaster Josh Friedel, my name is Ben Simon. We'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. right here from St. Louis. Until then, so long from the Show Me State.